Foster care, the pros and cons of each age group placement. Are you a foster parent? Are you getting ready to become a foster parent? And you need to know what is the perfect age group for your home, for your family. Today, we're going to talk about 4 things that you might want to consider before you take your first foster placement, as well as the pros and cons of each age group. So that would be teenagers, preteens, grade school, toddlers, as well as infants. And at the end, make sure to stick around for my final thoughts. You might have watched my other videos. Should I be a foster parent? What is all required to be a foster parent? And should I go with a state agency or should I go with a private agency? And now you are ready to check off that little box that's on your paperwork that talks about what is the age group that you would like to choose for your foster home. And so we are going to talk about some of those things today. So 4 things that you might want to consider as you get ready to choose the age group for your foster license. And these are taken not just from me, but from the WAC, which is the Washington Administration Code in my state. Now, your state might look different depending on what state you live in and what their particular codes are. But these are from my state, things that you should just consider as you look at different age groups for your home. So the first thing you might want to consider as you look at what ages do you think that you can have in your home as a foster placement. The first thing would be your skill set. So what is your past experiences? Have you been a nurse working in the NICU with drug exposed or preemie babies? Maybe that's your expertise, or maybe you're a teacher or a paraeducator that has worked with kids that have significant developmental or physical disabilities. Maybe you're a physical therapist, or maybe your experience is working with teenage kids in a group home or in some other kind of facility like that. So as you consider what age group of kids that you might want to take, look at your past experience. Where is your greatest strength? Where maybe might be your greatest weakness? And take that into consideration as you begin to evaluate what is a good age group for you and your home. The second thing you might want to consider is what are the number of providers that you have in your home? So do you have maybe 4 biological kids and you're a single parent? That may make you evaluate how many kids, what age group kids you might need to have in your home. Do you have kids with special needs or disabilities? Do you have 2 caregivers and maybe they're both retired and they're home all day, or you and your spouse, they work from home. And so you have a lot of time on your hands. The number of kids that you may take, it might increase. And the gender or maybe the age group of kids, it might look a little different from someone who maybe works full time and is needing daycare and only has 1 parent home. What are the physical accommodations of your home? So what is the actual layout of your home? Do you maybe only have 1 extra bedroom and you have 4 boys and they're in that bedroom and you want to have a baby girl who is 2? So that might not work because babies under 1 can be in your bedroom, but kids older than 1 can't. They can't share a room with the opposite gender or with kids that are older. And so take into account, what does your home layout look like? Do you live in an apartment, but you want to take 6 placements? Again, that might not be realistic. You just want to look at your specific environment and the layout of your home and what it looks like as you begin to consider what age group might work best for you. The 4th thing to consider as you evaluate what age kids that you want in your foster home, it would be the present needs of the kids that are already in your care. So what are the needs of maybe your biological kids or your adopted children? Do you have a child that has significant special needs, or maybe 2 children that have significant special needs? Do you have maybe teenagers that need a lot of attention and maybe they're emotionally volatile? Do you have maybe a younger boy who is aggressive and you want to get a little baby girl that he might feel threatened by? You will want to look at the big picture of the kids that are already in your home. So some other things that you also might consider is that you legally in our state, in Washington state, you cannot have more than 6 kids in your home at the time. So 6 licensed foster kids, that includes adopted or biological kids, and that is with 2 licensed caregivers. So 2 parents, that's 6 kids. Sometimes there is an exception. So if there's a biological sibling that's coming, they may expand your license to be able to keep those siblings together. However, if you are a single parent and there's only 1 caregiver, the maximum amount of children in our state is 4. So that also depends on the level of needs of those kids as well. And again, every state is different. So your state might look completely different. You'll want to check with your state licensing or with your private agency to see what those limits and those ceilings are to how many kids that can come into your home. So in Washington State, we are not allowed to take more than 2 kids that are 2 and under. So for example, if you have a 6-month-old and a 1.5-year-old, they will not license you for a brand new baby from the hospital. They just want these kids to have the most excellent care possible. Again, take into consideration the kids that are already in your home, whether these kids have medical needs, they're immobile, or they have significant behavior issues. They will put a cap on your license. And again, it just depends on your state. So check with your state so you know what your limits and your ceiling are for kids. It's not about how many we serve, but how well we're able to serve the kids that are in our care. Now let's jump into the pros and cons of each age group of kids that may be in our care. I'm going to work backwards, so I'm going to start with teenagers, and we're going to discuss the pros of having a teenager in your home. I have a friend of mine that she took younger kids as foster children, and it wasn't a good fit for her. She had her own adopted little boy, and they just seemed to clash, and it seemed really hard to meet multiple kids' needs that were similar to the same age. And then she kind of went out on a limb and she took an older foster daughter. She was a teenager, I believe 16 years old at the time, and for whatever reason, it was the biggest blessing to her. She's had this girl for years, and it just is a great fit. She would have never guessed or imagined. However, her home worked best for an older teenage daughter. And so your home might be different. And God may bring kids that you would least expect into your home, and teenagers, it might be one of them. So teenagers, what are some pros of fostering teenagers in your home? One is they are old enough to really remember their stories. They remember being in homes that weren't so great, maybe even foster homes that weren't so great. And likely they are going to be very appreciative. They're going to see a contrast. They're going to see you trying. They're going to cognitively be able to understand that you are making a selfless effort to take care of them. A lot of times these kids pitch in. They're very grateful. A lot of times they're very humble. They want to make this work. They know that they're getting to the age where they may age out and never have a family. They will have nowhere to go on Christmas. They will have no one to celebrate their birthdays with them. And they want to make this work. And so there's a lot of benefits to taking a teenager foster child. Another pro of having a teenager in your home as a foster placement is because these children likely will establish relationships with you that you may have and they may have for the rest of their lives. I just went to a graduation of a girl we had last weekend, and it was the biggest blessing to see how much she had changed and grown and to still get to be a part of her life. You may find that these kids bless you, not just while you're fostering, but long after, as you see them get married and have kids, as you guide and instruct them, or they just come over to hang out with you. These are often lifelong relationships as a result of you being willing to say yes and have these kids in your home. As you foster a teenager, oftentimes it almost becomes like this friendship, like this mutual agreement of trust. And so no, you don't need to baby them like you would a younger child, but you do grow this bond and this friendship, and you can start to trust them with more and more. And it can be a really beautiful thing that isn't just a blessing for the foster child and the teen, but it will be a blessing for you as well. So let's talk about the negative aspects or the hard things about fostering teenagers. One might be that they are older and they have gone through a lot. They have a lot of memories. They've had a lot of experiences. And likely those experiences have negatively imprinted upon them, upon their mind or their understanding of themselves. And that often requires a lot of therapy, a lot of reteaching, a lot of breaking things down and really educating them of what a healthy and really good home looks like. Sometimes these kids, they may resist your help. They may have bonded emotionally with another foster family or with their birth families in a way that they push you away, maybe intentionally, maybe not even intentionally. And that can be really hard as you open up your home and you're trying to give your time and your energy to someone else. To have an older child push you away or to not receive what you're offering them, it can feel really difficult at times. There can also sometimes be negative behaviors attached to that. So if you have younger biological or adopted siblings, that negative behavior can kind of carry over to those younger kids. And so that might be something you might want to gauge or to monitor or at least be aware of. And lastly, sometimes these kids, they're getting ready to go to graduate and to establish a life for themselves. They're going to need a lot of time and energy to teach them skills, maybe cooking, maybe shopping or balancing a budget, maybe learning how to drive a car. And so there's a lot of teaching, like kind of adultish, older teaching that you will need to do as a foster parent to a teenager. Let's talk about preteens. So what are some of the pros of fostering a preteen child? So that would be between like 11 or maybe 10 and 13 years old. What does that look like? So anyone that knows a middle schooler knows that these kids can be hysterical. They can be goofy and funny and attention seeking. Sometimes they can be super dramatic, but they are always going to leave an impression on your home. These kids are easy to love often because they're going to show antics and maybe tell jokes and do things to try to connect with you. As a teenager, a lot of times there can be a lot of negative emotions or thoughts about themselves, but these kids also are really impressionable. And so when you start to tell them that they're beautiful or they're kind or they're generous, they really absorb a lot of what you share. I love preteens because they're old enough to really understand concepts. So unlike maybe a toddler or even a school-age child, these kids really get when you tell them that they're worthy or capable or smart or good at something, they really grab it in like a sponge and they soak it into who they are. And that can be such a beautiful thing. Preteen kids can often love learning. They love to grow. They love to do new things. And they might even challenge you to get outside your comfort zone. And that is a really good thing. These kids often work super hard. They often do their very best that they can do. And they are so sensitive to your love or your nurture or your care for them. And so it can be such a blessing to take a preteen. Don't be scared of it because of horror stories of what someone else has told you. These kids, it's at such a crucial age for these kids to bond and connect and to learn what a healthy home is. So don't be afraid to take these kids. They are a blessing more than you know. Some of the negative aspects of maybe taking a preteen would be, you guessed it, hormones. These kids are trying to pull between childhood and adulthood. They may be sensitive or over-emotional or exaggerated in their response to things. They may be just beginning to see themselves as individuals, and they may be pressing away to be able to learn and develop the concept of who they are. And they also may be experiencing big emotions, maybe grieving or sadness about leaving their original family. And so as a foster child, we just need to be extra sensitive to what they're feeling and thinking and just give them space to go through the waves of emotions that might come as a preteen who is in foster care. Let's move on to school-age kids. And I would say this is between age 5 and age 10. What are some pros of caring for a child who's school-age? First of all, these kids are in school full time. If you've taken younger foster kids or cared for younger children, you know the benefits of a child being in a school situation. First of all, you can work full time. You don't have to worry about daycare. You have the oversight of teachers and maybe counselors and services that you previously had to drive or facilitate the transportation in. And so that can be a lot easier, especially if your child has a lot of special needs. These kids are still young enough to really mold into your family. They're not that individualized and separate. They haven't formed really necessarily concrete understandings of their situation or who they are. And so they likely will blend really well into your family. And that will be such a blessing to see. These kids generally, they want your guidance. They are learning new concepts and new understanding of so many different things. You may have to teach them what 4 plus 4 is, or how to tie their shoe, or teach them to ride a bike. And these are concepts that these kids are old enough to remember. They will have that in their memory bank for the rest of their lives. And so as a school-age child, you are leaving lifelong impressions on these children. What I've found is that school-aged kids also, they thrive in anything new. So if you put them in sports, if they're in therapy, or if they have new play dates with new friends, these kids just absorb it and they enjoy it and they really thrive. Their whole concept and understanding of who they are, who the world is, and who they are in the world is established by these new experiences that you can give these kids. And so I encourage you, take a school-aged child and you will see not only your world grow, but you will see their world grow as well. Let's talk about some negative things maybe of taking a school-age foster child. One of them might be that they're old enough to see other kids in their class, and they may absorb or experiment with how to behave based on those kids that they are around on a regular basis. And so that's just something to be aware of. It's not something to be scared of. And so you might need to teach them in the area of school or friendships or social or emotional health. And that's one thing that might be a challenge for some foster parents. School-age kids also might, for the first time ever, begin to be aware of their situation. They may be able to understand that they're in foster care. They may be able to look at the other kids and hear stories about their bio siblings or their mom or their dad, and they may start to feel a sense of sadness or grief about that. And that may be something just to be aware of as you work through those emotions with your grade schooler. And lastly, another hard thing about having a school-age child, it might be that other people are starting to see differences in this child and compared to other kids that are at their typical age. So those people might be teachers, it might be social workers, it might be your own biological family or parents. They may be comparing where when kids are little, a lot of times they blend in more and they seem to be like, oh, they're just toddlers or they're just little kids. But once kids get in school, there seems to be this gauge or maybe a competition of kids like, are they reading yet? Are they writing yet? Are they able to ride a bike? What are they able to do? And they will start to label these kids. And that could be really hard, maybe for the child, but also for you as a foster parent. And so that's just something to be aware of, to know that you might need to establish a thick skin and to really invest in these kids, regardless of where they are in comparison to other kids that are also their age. Toddlers, let's talk about them. What are the pros of having toddlers? Well, they just have lots of energy. I have 2 of them right now, and whew, life is so busy. It is crazy sometimes. Toddlers are filled with life and filled with energy. As you know, they love to do new things. They love to try new things and go new places and just explore. And that can bring a lot of life and a lot of joy to your foster home. Toddlers can be so fun as well because they're beginning to establish their personality and likes and dislikes. They know where they want to go and what they want to wear. Do they want to wear a princess dress or tutus every day, or what their little lives will look like? And so that is super fun because it is kind of like they're telling their story through their likes and their dislikes, and that could be super fun to watch. These kids also can be super affectionate. They know when they need a hug. They really sometimes struggle with boundaries, and they're super social. Unlike an infant, toddlers are now beginning to express what they want and what they don't want and who they are. And sometimes that can make it a lot easier as a foster parent. They may say in words what they like or not like, and they may do it through actions, but it is so much easier to be able to understand the child in particular and to know how to meet their needs because they are beginning to express their needs through either behavior or through their words. And lastly, the benefit of having a toddler versus an infant is that as a toddler, these kids, they don't need all the stuff that you usually carry around with an infant. So as you know, with an infant, you need a diaper bag and you need extra clothes and diapers and maybe formula and all the things that come with infants. And so as a toddler, it can be easy. You jump them in the car seat. Sometimes they even buckle themselves and you can be out the door at the park, and it can really make parenting a lot of fun. Now let's talk about some of maybe the negative things about fostering a toddler toddler. So as we know, they have big emotions, they communicate, and some of the ways they communicate are through behavior. And so likely you will have foster children in your care that will have big emotions. They may have tantrums, they may go through rages, they may have sleep issues. Toddlers can be extremely challenging at times, but also a blessing. Some of these toddlers also may not be potty trained. There may be expenses for diapers or pull-ups or extracurricular activities. These kids have lots of needs. They're engaging the world around them, and they need a lot of support, a lot of care. They also may be a part of what is like the Birth Through 3 or a program for preschoolers that may require you traveling, taking them to preschool or picking them up, and connecting in new ways with doctors or therapists or caregivers that maybe you wouldn't need to do with an older child or with an infant. And lastly, having a toddler, it can be draining at times. These kids are physically demanding. They run around, they're busy, they're so fun, but at the same time, it may drain you mentally and physically and emotionally. And if you're someone that maybe is older in age or have physical limitations, that may be something that you may want to consider before taking a toddler foster placement. Infant. So let's talk about the pros and cons of taking an infant into foster care. And for the sake of time, we are going to say an infant is someone that's 0 to 1 years old. So the pro, obviously, is that infants are adorable. They are cuddly and cute and sweet. They're not mobile. So unlike a toddler, they don't get around. You don't need to chase them around everywhere. They're instantly loved by family and friends. So if you have family or friends that maybe have questioned your fostering journey or don't agree with it, likely their chances is that a toddler or an infant, is just going to win them over, and they're going to fall instantly in love with these newborn babies. These babies as well may not have attachment disorder that an older child may have. They may not have been through a whole bunch of homes, and so they're easier to connect with and bond with, and they're more likely to attach because they are under 1 year of age, and they likely have had as many moves as an older foster child. A con or a negative of having an infant in your home. Number one is that these kids grow so fast. You may find that you're getting preemie clothes and the newborn in 3 to 6 and 6 to 9 and on, and there's a lot of expense that comes with a newborn. So a lot of these kids have special formulas, they have diapers that you need to purchase out of pocket, and there's just a lot of different expenses as far as toys or engaging activities or places that you may need to take them to, special medical appointments that are extra and abundant because they are newborns. And so they're trying to establish a base really of who that child is and what their needs are when they come into care. In addition, infants often have troubles with sleeping. They have troubles maybe with colic or with jaundice. And so if you're not big on sleep, maybe an infant's right for you. But from our experience in taking infants into our home is a lot of times these little babies, they just don't sleep, even until they're 1 year old. They have special circumstances. Maybe there's cognitive things going on in their brain, or they still have a lot of exposures or withdrawals or hypervigilance or sensitivities. And so there's a lot of gauging and kind of playing and toying with what that child needs or doesn't need, what it's sensitive to or not sensitive to. And so there is a lot of learning with an infant and a newborn that does take a lot of time and a lot of focus, really. And finally, my negative, if you will, about taking an infant is that these kids, in my opinion, really need a consistent caregiver. They need someone who will be there, who will not leave them in daycare early in the morning, go to work all day, and then come back for a few hours at night. These kids have struggled maybe in a care facility recovering from drugs, or they just really need bonding. They were ripped away from their first connection, which is their birth mom, and they need a consistent caregiver. And so if you're super busy, if you're working full time and you don't have a lot of time in your hands, maybe an infant isn't right for you. So these are my final thoughts. A lot of times we have in our mind a certain age group that we want to take into our home. And my guess is, and my prayer is after this video, you have a clear idea of what a good fit and a good age group is for you and your family. However, in our experience over the past 14 years of being foster parents, we have taken kids outside of the scope of what we thought we were originally going to take. And to be honest, it was those kids that we said yes to that surpassed our expectations of fostering and what these kids are like and how we could learn and grow as a result of them. So I just want to encourage you, listen to your gut. Go with whatever God puts in your path and really lean and stretch yourself to take kids outside outside of your limitations, because they will bless you, whether they are 1 or whether they are 15, whether they are 2 or whether they are 20. So just say yes and watch what God will do. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe for more content just like this. Like it and share it with your friends, and leave a comment. Let me know where you're at in the fostering journey. And remember, go out, live bold, and be brave.